the Workthreat group. This is part 2 of our video in reference the mass murders or active shooters or hostile intruders, whatever we want to call them. Part 1 we went over the Secret Service study of what they discovered as far as where these people came from, what are their motives, that kind of thing. I want to talk a little bit more about some of the red flags that they discovered too, some of the commonalities that all these people had. It doesn't matter whether it happened, the shooting happened at a school, a business, a church. Believe it or not, some common elements there, and that's what you need to focus on. So as we said in part 1, and part 1 I advise you to review at your leisure because some good statistics in there. But we said there's 28 mass murders in 2017. The Secret Service looked at those and made a study of that. And what they found is that the biggest consistent thing is consistency across the board was that 100% of every single shooter had at least one stressor, one major stressor in their lives that occurred prior to the shooting. Now, some of these stressors were things like a family, romantic relationships, such as spousal entanglements, divorces, romantic breakups, that kind of thing. Personal issues such as unstable living conditions, physical illnesses. In work or school environments, they were fired or suspended, or maybe they were filing grievances, they were being bullied, all those kinds of things. And contact with law enforcement that did not result in arrest or charges, such as being the subject of domestic disturbance calls or being sought for a crime unrelated to their attack. But the common thing is stress. I don't know if you're experiencing it, but in our shop, the Workthreat group, we are getting more and more calls about, just got a lot of people that are under a lot of stress and they're just not sure how to handle it. When I did my doctorate, that was way back in 1979, that happened to be what my dissertation was all about, stress and how to alleviate stress and how to deal with it. So we handled that in the Workthreat group. But it's now becoming a major issue in companies around the globe, schools, expectations of what's expected of people. So it's something to definitely look at. The other major one that was a big surprise was that 57% had financial instability. They couldn't maintain employment. These financial stressors included inability to maintain employment, living in homeless shelters, failed business ventures, and civil court filings and proceedings such as judgments, evictions, tax warrants, even wage garnishments. For 10 of the attackers, these stressors occurred within 1 year of the attack. So stress is unfortunately all too common. Now, I'm not going to go into, spend a lot of time on the rest of this. It's kind of a repeat from what part 1 was, but they also had some history of drug abuse, some criminal charges beyond traffic violations, and some history of either domestic violence or mental health issues. And then looking at some of the other common things they've had that again is explained more in part 1. 46 had personal grievances, 25% subscribed to specific belief systems, 39% developed a fixation on a person, 57% resulted in harm to random persons, and 14% in harm to pre-selected targets. So it's not as we used to think. We used to think it was always pre-selected targets, or pretty much the majority of the time at least. It's not. It can be random. It certainly is becoming more evident of that. One of the other signs that showed that was a common thing that popped up was aggression. We call it aggressive narcissism. Most of the attackers, that's 82%, exhibited behaviors that were indicative of aggressive narcissism, as evidenced by displays of rigidness, hostility, or extreme self-centeredness. For example, some inappropriately asserted control over others, as observed by their histories of domestic violence, sexual assault, harassment, or harming animals. Those are signs. Those are red flags you need to pay attention to. Other aggressive signs, others had a history of violent or angry outbursts following interpersonal conflicts with coworkers, neighbors, even family members. Some attackers displayed an inflated sense of self-worth or entitlement, unrealistically believing that they were deserving of certain relationships, successes, or benefits, with some reacting angrily when they did not obtain what they believed they deserved. How about communications with the target? Generally, we believed that it didn't happen, certainly not directly with the target, that much. It happened some, but really not that much. This study kind of shows a little different light. Most of the attackers, 79%, had engaged in threatening or concerning communications. While half had threatened someone, 50%, 1/3 threatened the target, 36%, in some way prior to their attack. All 10 of the attackers in the latter group had a personal relationship to the target, and that they were either co-workers, domestic partners, neighbors, or classmates. Through the presence of prior threats to the target is unusual for some forms of targeted violence, such as an assassination, it is often seen in cases involving domestic or workplace violence, which together represent over 1/3 of the mass attacks described in this report. Concerning communications, outside of threatening communications, 3/4 of the attackers, 75%, engaged in other concerning communications that did not reach the threshold of a threat, such as making overly angry statements, racist comments, references to past attackers, suicidal language, or comments indicative of their intent to carry out an attack. In some cases, these communications caused alarm among those who observed them. And in many of those cases, unfortunately, they did not report it. Some did, but unfortunately, sometimes those were not even acted upon. So, to sum it up, you've got a lot of situations where there are some red flags. This is not something that you live in a bubble and it's going to happen and there are no controls. There are plenty of controls. So when you're thinking about an active shooter program or a hostile intruder program or anything like this, be thinking of these things and be sure that whomever you decide to bring in as your expert to help you put together a plan, they understand this kind of thing. They're not just giving you something, the run, hide, fight type of rhetoric. That just doesn't work for everybody. You have to determine what's going to work best for you, what's going to work best for your environment. And so an assessment has to be done before anything. Obviously, the Workthreat group can do that. We'd be happy to talk to you about it. Please give us a call or contact us via email. Visit our website at www.workthreat.com, and we'll be glad to help you. Thank you.